Welcome, everyone. This is Mary Vandenplas, Director of Operations and Research here at Burtch Works. Today, two of our senior quantitative recruiters, Linda Burtch and Heidi Kalish, will share the results of our 2020 Data Science and Predictive Analytics Salaries Study. And now a quick introduction of our speakers today. Linda Burtch is an industry leader in the analytics and data science recruiting space and has dedicated her career to becoming a subject matter expert on quantitative hiring and market trends. Heidi Kalish has over 20 years of experience recruiting analytics professionals, and she specializes in the financial services roles, including credit risk, fraud analytics, and more. Both Linda and Heidi have been actively involved in the analytics community, participating in groups like the American Statistical Association and Informs for years. And you may have also read some of their excellent insights on the Burtch Works blog. In the past several years, Burtch Works has been repeatedly mentioned in the popular press regarding analytics talent trends, including publications such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, InformationWeek, the Chicago Tribune, and the Economist. And this year, Burtch Works was once again recognized by Forbes as one of America's best recruiting firms. And now I'm going to turn things over to you, Linda and Heidi.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was a nice introduction. We've got a jam-packed schedule today. So Heidi and I are going to be talking for about 45 minutes. And then after that, we'll open up things for questions. We're not going to have we're not going to be able to take too many questions today because it's a fairly long formal part of this, but hopefully we'll be able to get back in touch with you if we can't get to your questions on a more personal note. So not only are we going to talk about the salary study, but we're also going to share insights on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the analytics community. Now, many of you are familiar with our recent research, and in fact, many of you have also participated in our surveys. And I want to take a second here to thank you all very much if you have participated. So I have compiled a lot of insights that I want to share, but again, there's a lot of other stuff behind all of this, so be sure to check out our blog for more details. And also stay tuned. I mean, we're going to have many more interesting insights as the months go on here into the future. So now, before we get into the data, I want to quickly mention a few things about our reports. First of all, this is the 8th year that we're publishing this salary study, and it's used by countless firms. A number of my hiring managers have told me over time that they have used it in order to get their team raises, but not only raises for their teams, but also raises for themselves, which is a good thing. So it has robust data and insights, and Heidi and I are going to share a number of those highlights. But again, there's a lot more behind it, so be sure to download the study and get more details. Now, just so you know, we have a different way of collecting data. We interview each and every one of the folks that are included in this. So there's no online survey. So we talk to people all day, as you can imagine. And one of the things that we cover is, of course, salaries. And most of our people are quite willing to share that information with us. Now, you know, we all know there's been a lot made of non-disclosure of salaries over the last couple of years. And, you know, I have kind of a contrarian thought on that because I believe in the opposite. I mean, I think transparency wins the day. I mean, everybody knows, if everybody knew what everybody made, then there wouldn't be any funny business going on. So transparency, I think, and more knowledge is for the best. So thanks for trusting us and also sharing your compensation history and information with us. So we released our first report back in 2013, and this is the second year that we're presenting the data for predictive analytics professionals and data scientists side by side. The analytics and the data science discipline is maturing, so tools are becoming much more robust. The applications are becoming much more widespread. There's more and more academic programs, and they're maturing. So there's this blending between a a predictive analytics professional and a data scientist. But we still find that there's a difference in compensation between the two groups. And Heidi's going to talk about how we define a predictive analytics professional and a data scientist. So this webinar is going to have highlights again, but more data. Take a look at our website and be sure to pull the study. So, and it's something like 50 plus pages long, I think, Mary, right? So, and it's free. So download it at burtchworks.com/study. Now,
Yeah,
Heidi's going to
add, Linda, it's 56 pages, just in case you're curious.
Oh boy, oh boy. So yes, it was a long one this year. So Heidi's going to kick us off with an explanation of our methodology and a few definitions just to set the stage. Heidi.
Thank you, Linda. And Mary, thank you for that nice introduction as well. Yeah, so we've always regarded data scientists as a specialized subset of predictive analytics professionals. And our hope in presenting these two sets of data side by side instead of in separate studies is to show some of the interesting comparisons between the two groups that we've noticed over the past few years. We've typically segmented data scientists and predictive analytics professionals because of skill set differences that led to differing salary bands. But as I hope you'll see from some of the other data we've highlighted here, there are many other differences besides just salaries. So data science versus predictive analytics. How do we separate these groups for analysis then? Both data scientists and predictive analytics professionals are able to analyze data. They glean insights from it and then prescribe action for their organization based on it. Both have strong quantitative skills like modeling. But the main distinction as we define them is that data scientists' work focuses primarily on using unstructured or streaming data, while predictive analysts use mostly structured data. So as a result, you'll often see data scientists have a computer science, coding, and programming skill set that other analytics professionals might not have. So what is a typical academic background for these candidates? While both groups may come from a statistics or math background, data scientists are more likely to have studied engineering or computer science, while predictive analytics professionals are more likely to have some business background or economics. And we're also seeing newer programs popping up as well as more professionals using things like online courses or boot camps to retrain or expand their skill sets. All right, typical tools. As for typical tools, both may use a wide variety of tools to tackle their work. We've listed some of the more common ones that we tend to see here, but honestly, I feel like I hear about new ones pretty much on a weekly basis, but these are certainly the most typical tools that we tend to see for these professionals.
Right. And the thing you have to keep in mind is tools is not really the key way to evaluate the difference between a data scientist and a predictive analytics professional. Really, it tends to be about the application that they're working in. They tend to be quite different. A predictive analytics professional may be working with market mix models, let's say, or attribution analytics. They might be doing inventory optimization or churn or fraud analysis. Whereas a data scientist is going to be working with data that might be streaming or it might be text data. So they could be text mining, let's say, that's used oftentimes in legal documents as well as, tons of other applications now. Predictive maintenance and use of Internet of Things data is very common in the energy industry and the agricultural industry. Connected cars also is another good example of that. that. Ford and GM both have big groups like that. Caterpillar and John Deere also have large teams of IoT data scientists. And computer vision is another application area. You know, Getty's been a client of ours. Getty Images has been a client of ours for a lot of years, as well as a number of insurance organizations now. If you get into a car accident, you don't have an adjuster come out anymore. You just take a picture and upload it, and they use data science in order to evaluate evaluate the cost of the repair.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Linda. Now, I do want to touch quickly on groups that are not included in our study. And then I promise we'll get to the data. So some of the groups that this study doesn't include, marketing researchers, they actually have their own study that we will release in the fall. Software developers, traditional MBAs, those tend to not typically be quite as quantitative. Web analytics, and then business intelligence and information technology. In addition, a lot of analytics people use tools like Excel, PowerPoint, Google Analytics, Tableau, but if that's all that they're using, then they don't qualify for our sample. All right, now let's jump into the data. So Linda, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. So first, I want to start with our demographic analysis, you know, where we're going to show predictive analytics professionals versus data scientists results side by side, so you can compare from that angle. Now, on the next slide, you can see that both of these disciplines skew very young. There's been so much interest in this field, and so many people are jumping into the field. And part of that also is due, obviously, because of the new applications. You know, now the data science or data storage is so inexpensive. Sensors are everywhere, and so they're collecting lots of data. So in 2008, so 12 years ago, there was only one advanced degree program in the United States focused specifically on business analytics, and now there are over 300. So that gives you a general idea of why the supply is at least starting to catch up with the demand. So now on the next slide, you can see that many of the data scientists have a PhD, whereas with predictive analytics professionals, it's more likely they'll have a master's degree. About 47% of data scientists hold a PhD, while only 15% of their counterparts in analytics do. So here's an interesting slide. When we look at the area of study from the highest degree in each field, and Heidi kind of alluded to that, we can see that in both cases, statistics and math is the most common field of study for both groups. But then it diverges. You can see here that data scientists are more likely to have computer science or engineering degrees, while the predictive analytics professionals are more likely to come from a business or econ background. But far and away, math and statistics is usually the degree of choice. So the next slide talks about or shows which industry predictive analytics professionals and data scientists are employed. You can see here, tech is dominant for data scientists. Nearly 50% of data scientists are employed in a technology organization. And this has been pretty typical over the last several years that we've been doing these reports. The most common industry for predictive analytics employers are typically in financial services, and then that's followed by advertising and marketing services firms. Now, we're seeing more predictive analytics professionals move toward healthcare as that industry has become much more sophisticated and data-driven. So I'll be watching that number in the years ahead. Now, let's take a look at the gender breakdown. Men continue to dominate the quantitative field, no surprise. You see that the proportion of women is higher in predictive analytics than it is in data science. The predictive analytics number is about on par with what you might see in comparable STEM fields. So I'll add also that there are more women now in the field than ever. When I look back on our data from 2017, women made up 24% of that sample. So it's slowly creeping upward. The other thing I'll add is that anecdotally, I know that there are more women in analytics than there ever has been before, but also the number of men getting into the field has increased. So it's not moving that percentage needle up very much for women. Now, this slide is looking specifically at the predictive analytics sample, but here you can see how the proportion of women shifts as experience and management level increases. We have individual contributors at the bottom, starting with 0 to 3 years experience, all the way up to managers at the senior level. Okay, so now the slides you've all been waiting for. Heidi is going to take it over and talk about salaries.
That is great. Thank you again, Linda. I'd like to set the stage by describing the various job categories. First, based on the criteria we outlined earlier, we determine if the individual is predictive analytics or data science. And then from there, we classify them into one of 6 job categories. We'll refer to these throughout today's webinar, so I wanted to quickly review them. Many of you may know from prior studies, but for those of you who do not, when we analyze our data, first we assign each professional to a job category as either an individual contributor, which we abbreviate to an IC, or manager, which we abbreviate to MG. And then we break these ICs and MGs into one of 3 levels. So individual contributors at level 1 are those that are typically in the first 3 years of their career. And then level 2 professionals have about 4 to 8 years of experience, and they are hands-on with the data along with solving more advanced business problems. For level 3 professionals, usually they have over 9 years of experience and are likely to help train and mentor more junior analysts. Usually at this point, they are also considered subject matter experts. Now for managers, we also have 3 levels dependent upon their primary function, as well as the number of people they manage. So a level 1 manager is typically tactical in focus and may manage 1 to 3 direct reports, while level 2 leads a function or is responsible for executing strategy and typically has 4 to 9 direct reports. Now managers at level 3 are the most senior leaders. They are the executive level, and they're responsible for determining the strategy of the entire team, typically have P&L responsibility for their area of the business, and will likely have larger teams of 10 or more direct reports. All right, so now let's see how salaries changed for each group compared to our analysis in 2019. All right, here you can see the IC salaries for predictive analytics, which increased for IC2 and IC3s, stayed about the same for IC1s.
Right, and that's interesting. At the entry level and at the junior level, I think this is the first year that that number is flat. So we've oftentimes seen that go up and actually go up in with pretty big numbers. Now, I suspect what's going on here is that effect that I've been talking to you about with supply now getting closer to the demand. So there's a lot of interest in the field, and there's a lot more advanced degree programs. So again, it's we may be seeing that effect at the IC1 level, and as time goes on, it'll probably trickle up to the other couple of levels too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, definitely. All right, so let's move on to the managers. So here you can see that at the manager level, predictive analytics salaries were, for the most part, steady across the three different levels. Moving on to data scientists, our numbers showed that for data scientists, IC salaries were mostly unchanged from last year. And again, that's across all three of the levels there. However, data science managers showed a slight increase at the MG1 and MG2 levels, while staying about the same at the MG3 level.
Yeah, and again, I think here there continues to be a supply issue, and so there's going to be still some pressure on the leadership side, and salaries will continue to increase a little bit. So 5 to 7 years from now, we may see some of that pressure ease up.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so now, as we mentioned before, one of the reasons we keep these groups segmented is because their differing skills tend to impact salaries. And here you can see just how much of a difference that can make. Especially looking at IC1s, the difference there is anywhere from 19 to 30%. And then the disparity becomes less pronounced among executives. At that level, leadership skills tend to have more of an impact on salary than technical expertise.
Yeah, and right. And I think, those soft skills are, everybody hears about how important soft skills are, right? But what does that mean really? And I guess, the way I evaluate a senior level person is I evaluate their ability to be, I think three main things. First, their ability to develop a strong partnership and build trust with their business unit stakeholders in order to implement, sort of new methodologies into the workplace. Secondly, I think they need to have the ability to customize the message and the technical approach to a business problem to match the audience, whoever it is they're talking to. They need to evaluate that and keep that in mind. And then finally, I think it's very important that they need to keep their teams focused on business value of the work that they're doing. A lot of times, quantitative people really like to work on problems that are interesting. And sometimes that can be at the expense of problems that are important. So you really need to make sure that you have, you understand business value of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely great points. Now we want to kind of move along to recent events around COVID-19 and how that's impacted the quantitative community. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Linda, to go over some of that information.
Yeah, and it's we actually aren't presenting quite as much information on the salary study this year as we have in the past, simply because we wanted to spend a little bit of time on some of the insights that we've collected on the impact COVID-19 has had on the analytics community. So, and everybody knows it's been a huge impact. I mean, it is the biggest career event in my lifetime for sure. So we have over 70,000 contacts that we routinely stay in touch with. So in March, when the coronavirus was declared a worldwide pandemic and lockdowns were put into place, I wanted to better understand how it impacted the analytics community and follow it over time. We teamed up with IIA, which is the International Institute for Analytics. It's a research and advisory firm that was founded by Jack Phillips and Tom Davenport. Many of you are probably familiar with that group. We did a pulse survey, 5 waves from the end of March to the end of May. And then we did a follow-up survey just this last month where we got responses from about 400 people, I think, last month. So much of the insights that I'm going to present today come out of those survey responses. But first, I want to start with some wider data. So first of all, the unemployment rate. Here you can see it capped in April at 14.7%, and that contrasts with the next highest time back in 1982 when it was 10.8%. Now, predictions from the White House back in April was that that this rate was going to go over 20%. So luckily, that did not happen. Now, this is kind of an interesting chart. I started to follow layoffs and furloughs as they were announced right after the shutdown happened. And this is just a partial list, so it's by far not complete. But I wanted to follow from week to week who was going through layoffs. And you can see there's some really interesting patterns in this. I mean, right away, the international airlines laid off, as well as the hospitality organizations. And within the following 2, 3, 4 weeks, many of the retailers put a lot of people on furlough or had to lay them off. After that, things quieted down just a little bit, but what I found interesting was that startups like WeWork and Uber and Lyft and Groupon, they didn't start laying off until about 5 or 6 weeks into the shutdown. It kind of surprised me that they actually didn't take some kind of action sooner. So now the next slide, I actually put this slide together for a presentation I did back in May, and I wanted to use it again to show that what's happened, I guess, since that time. Airlines have certainly announced layoffs, and they're offering a number of packages, but they can't technically lay anybody off until after September 30th because of the money that they're taking from the government. Now, I'm now hearing a lot about advertising agencies doing significant cutbacks. Everybody knows ad dollars that were coming in. Have taken a really big hit. Also, big consulting, and by that I mean Accenture, Deloitte, PwC. They all started laying off about 3 weeks ago or so. And in my conversations with people in these consulting organizations, it seems like many of them had very strong pipelines going into the crisis. And in the beginning of the crisis, many of them had to pivot what they were doing to work specifically on COVID-related projects for their clients. But now that we're 3 or 4 or 5 months in, the pipeline is slimming down. So we're seeing layoffs. Now we'll see what happens. I mean, banks are announcing significant reserves for an upcoming loan crisis that they're anticipating. But then I saw a report just last week that many people seem to be using their stimulus check to pay down credit card debt. So interesting things going on that way.
Yeah, I'd like to add here, for financial services specifically, I know a lot of the big banks announced that they will not be having any layoffs through the end of this year. However, in terms of starting up hiring again, many of the financial service clients that I've spoken to are hesitant, it seems, because I think they're concerned that people will have trouble paying their bills once the stimulus money runs out. But on the plus side, we have started seeing an uptick in new roles coming in, so that's definitely good.
Right, right. Yeah, I wanted to mention that there are organizations that are hiring. We started getting calls in about mid-May that are, from companies that are coming off of hiring freezes. So, the consumer packaged goods industry, the insurance organizations, and healthcare. It seems like you're either on the right side or the wrong side of this crisis. Also, we're getting calls from private equity organizations that are looking to beef up their analytics staff in some of their portfolio companies. And they want to hire because they recognize the need to become a lot more sophisticated in the kind of analytics that go way beyond just the Excel reports that they're used to generating. So they want to hire more sophisticated talent, and they recognize that this is an opportunity to have access to talent that they might not ordinarily have access to. So it's in that business, it's all about timing. So let's talk about the analytics community itself. Is anybody working business as usual? So work from home is the new normal. Many of you know our flash surveys. Typically, I ask 1 or 2 questions and I get lots and lots of responses very quickly because they're so quick and easy. So we slice and dice that information by the demographic information that we know about the person already. So their level, their industry, where they live, and so on and so forth. So I asked one question, is anybody not working from home? And this was conducted back in May. I didn't have to slice and dice anything because only 1.5 people said that they were working in the office. So one was working at a quality control at a plant, and another one was going in 2 to 3 times a week in support of a lab operation. So I wasn't surprised with that. So now here are some of the comments we've gotten back that we've collected along the way. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in commercial real estate in the upcoming years with all this disruption to their business. Now, recently, we've explored this topic a little bit further. We sent out another more extensive survey, and I'm going to talk about those results next. So, and they were really interesting. You can see here that roughly 25%, we asked the question about when are you going to head back to the office? And it seemed like roughly 25% are going to be back in the office by the end of this year. At least that's what the plans are right now. But a pretty high 28% said they didn't have any idea when they were going to be going back to the office. So lots and lots of things are kind of up in the air at this point.
Yeah, and I wanted to add in some interesting examples that we've seen kind of around this topic. I think everybody's probably seen Twitter, announce that their employees can stay remote forever if they wish. Google just recently announced that they're officially extending their work from home at least through summer 2021. And then I thought it was interesting that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg said that as many as 50% of their employees could be permanently remote in the coming years. However, there was kind of a little asterisk on that one. There may also be a salary adjustment. So for those that aren't based in their Silicon Valley headquarters, they could see some salary adjustments to kind of reflect that, which I thought was interesting.
Right, right. Okay, so what are the long-term impacts with work from home? We've been all doing this for about 5 months or so. It's getting to be or seem like it's very normal. But we've talked about, what are the longer term implications. Now, obviously, for the hiring folks out there, you have a much wider talent pool to pull from, many more options. But conversely, the candidates will also have many more employment choices. So will this reduce salaries? Maybe, as Heidi mentioned, Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook employees will have salary adjustments if they're living away from headquarters. So we'll see about that. There's all kinds of other challenges that have to do with onboarding new people. Now, it's not, more seasoned people, it's certainly easier to onboard them, but it is tough for people at their early career, and that could be very challenging. Now, other long-term impacts might include communication, the ability to collaborate both formally and informally, just a sense of community too, and whether or not that's going to be impacted, going right along also, of course, with culture. It's I'm not sure how you do that in a work from home situation. It's not easy. So, and then also, the productivity impact is something that you see written about quite a bit. And in the beginning, I think many organizations were very surprised at how productive people were being. But now there are questions that are starting to come out. One of those is around childcare. It's a big issue. And now that it looks like we're going, much of the country is going toward remote learning, at least part-time remote learning in the fall, it's going to be a really tough balancing act for people who have children at home. So I'm hearing about people now asking for a part-time schedule or a flexible schedule now because of that. So I thought these numbers would be interesting to those of you that are hiring on the junior end at this point. So we approached a number of the academic programs and asked them what impacts they were seeing, and we heard back from 19 different programs. And clearly, it's been a very difficult year. 26% said that they've had start dates delayed for their graduates. 79% said interviews were either paused or canceled entirely. 37% said job offers were rescinded, and 10% said there are no impacts, but there are two of those, and both of them said, well, at least not yet. So we wanted to find out how COVID-19 impacted analytics teams' staffing and hiring. And so this came back, and it was really pretty interesting. Fully 50% either saw no impact or, in fact, have been hiring. So that's a decent number. That's a real healthy number. I like that. Many firms used furloughs and salary cuts in order to avoid layoffs. And I've not seen this sort of action in past recessions. I mean, people used to be just simply laid off. So
yeah, no, I agree with that, Linda. Having been through a recession or two myself.
Right.
I think this pandemic presented an unusual set of problems with, a tough to predict recovery. So companies were being more creative and wanted to try to hang on to their people.
Right. So one last point here. I'm now hearing about, people are telling me that companies have announced that promotions are on hold, that there will be no salary increases this year, and there'll be no bonuses. It's surely not across the board, but many organizations are already preparing their people. So this next slide shows how the impacts have been over the size of the company. So it's pretty straightforward. It basically shows that, no surprise here, large companies have been less impacted than smaller companies and startups. So a number of companies have also stated that they won't do layoffs, at least until the end of the year. And some are also just on the right side of this crisis, like maybe they're selling cleaning products or toilet paper or whatever like that. So here we ask about job stability, both for the person, so personally, and then from your company's business perspective. So in both cases, people were feeling either very positive or somewhat positive about their stability. It's interesting to note, though, that they felt a bit more positive about their personal stability than about their company's stability. So there's a lot of self-confident people out there in analytics, but that's how it should be. So what is the future going to look like? Everybody wants to know. And I can tell you, it's not going to look like this picture anytime soon. So 2020 is a really complicated year. I mean, COVID-19 is at the headline here, but we of course have had the nationwide social justice movements. We also have a very contentious presidential election year. We've got civil unrest going on. The hurricane season is just getting started. We've got Hong Kong and China. We've got TikTok, cybersecurity. It's like crazy times right now. So, and you know, I'm in Evanston. We had a tornado touchdown 2 days ago, 3 miles from my house. So it just, a lot of things are going a little bit crazy this year. So now, how has recruiting changed in this new normal? And I'll tell you, I was a bit surprised at how companies really embraced a virtual model in order to recruit talent. So once they started hiring in May, they really picked it up and quickly. So lining up schedules now is certainly a lot easier. Lots of people aren't going on vacation, so it's much easier to schedule folks. And there's accessibility to the candidates also, because they're either not working or they're working full-time from home. It's also obviously much easier when you don't have to line up a whole people to meet a candidate who has to fly in and interview with everybody on one day. So also, start dates are sooner because relocation has been oftentimes put off until they get closer to a solid in-person schedule when they know what that's going to look like. The other thing we noticed is that technical assessments tend to come up front in weeding out candidates, especially at the IC levels, at the more junior levels. And I tell my clients that this is a good time to hire, because candidates are available now, and 6 months ago they couldn't have gotten them. So, but you got to keep in mind too that there's also competition. Companies are being forced really to move quickly because strong candidates are going on and off the market pretty quickly and getting multiple offers.
Yeah, Linda, I was just talking to a candidate earlier this week, and she had 2 offers, and it was kind of nice to see that even during this crazy time, there's still that kind of activity.
Right. Okay. Now, this year's salary information was collected through the end of April of this year. So the numbers this year won't see any impact from the COVID crisis and everything else that's going on this year. But I suspect we're going to see some impact to next year's numbers. The offers that we're seeing coming out right now are pretty much holding strong. So I don't see any companies that are taking advantage of the situation or lowballing offers. But it does make it more challenging for a candidate sometimes to negotiate hard in some cases. So now, one factor that I have my eye on is the whole idea behind what's happening with the kids going back to school or not, and how that might have an impact. I mean, people are have had to quit, or they've reduced their schedule because of homeschooling obligations now. So there's really a lot of pressure there on childcare issues. Okay, So this isn't the end. We'll keep you updated with current events, and what's true today obviously is not going to be true a month from now. But I really wanted to thank you all for attending today. And lastly, I wanted to add, I truly value the relationships that I've been able to develop with so many of you over the years. Your trust and partnership with me and with Burtch Works over the years has really been quite humbling to me. So thank you again. Okay, back to Mary. I think she has some commercial announcements or something like that.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, before we get to our questions, I just want to give everybody a little extra information and show you where to find more about us. But first of all, thank you very much to both Linda and Heidi for digging into all of that info for us. If you're looking for more data and analysis, download our full study. It's available at burtchworks.com/study, and we break everything down by quartiles, salary means, medians, demographic factors like gender and region, and much more. As I mentioned at the top of the call, it's 56 pages. We really outdid ourselves this year, I think. As for Burtch Works, if you don't know who we are, we're an executive recruiting firm specializing in quantitative fields like analytics, data science, and marketing research. We're the leading resource for insights about the hiring market, and we produce comprehensive salary reports like this one every year for our main specialty areas. And these reports contain 30 to 60 pages of data and can be downloaded for free at burtchworks.com/study. And if you're looking to add to your data science or predictive analytics staff, we'd be happy to speak with you and do some brainstorming about what you might have planned in terms of hiring before the end of the year. We offer contingency and retained services, anywhere from entry-level analysts all the way up to chief analytics officer or chief data scientist searches. Feel free to send us an email if you want to chat. That's info@burtchworks.com. And of course, if you're looking to browse opportunities, you can visit our job board, which is visited by thousands of quantitative professionals every month. And we have, as you can see listed on the screen, roles in all sorts of different areas within the quantitative space. And if you're looking for more hiring market insights, check out burtchworks.com/blog, where you can find our flash surveys on tool preferences, what motivated analytics professionals to change jobs, any of the COVID-19 research that we've done. We have a whole separate tag that you can browse for that. And we also have advice on resumes, interviews, evaluating job offers, and much more. To stay up to date on our latest research, you can also find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And finally, on our YouTube channel, found at youtube.com/burtchworks, you can find recordings of our other presentations, including our predictions webinar that Linda did at the beginning of the year. I think that one will be interesting to review, see where things actually went. Our immensely popular career planning webinar we did earlier this year. Done tons of job search tips, and this webinar recording will be available soon. And now the time has come to do a few questions for Linda and Heidi here. Hopefully we'll have, we only have time for a few, unfortunately, but if you have any burning questions, please continue to send them in. And if we can't get to them, we'll do our best to reach out to get in touch with you. So first up on our docket of questions, we've got a question about gender in predictive analytics. Specifically, do you see a gender pay gap in the salaries?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question, actually. And we do go into that in more detail in the full report. But it seems to be a very small gap. So I believe this year's women's salaries were 96 to 100% of men's for all predictive analytics professionals. Unfortunately, we don't do data science though, because the women's sample that we have is just too small to compare. But there's certainly more details.
To break it down by level, we don't have a sample size for that. So, right. But I mean, it's good that it's as tight as it is, but there shouldn't be any gap.
Yeah.
So, Right.
Getting there.
All right, and you know, we've seen a couple questions surrounding job hunting in the current market. So we have one saying, I wanted to find a new role in 2020. It was one of my goals this year, but then the pandemic hit. Should I shelve those plans? And if so, for how long?
Right. And that is a very difficult question to answer. Now, clearly, there's more candidates on the market now, analytical candidates on the market now than there's been in a long, long time. So it may not be the best time to look. But the other thing I'll mention is it's amazingly the job market itself is amazingly robust. So there are still many great opportunities. And it's easy to look for a job now because of availability of people, and people are more willing to talk because they're in a private setting, and so on. So it really depends. It's a tough question, because really many people will put their job search on hold unless they have to look for a job this next year, and we might see that somehow impact their career trajectory if this goes on for, let's say, another year, 18 months.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. I saw an interesting question come in about disclosing salaries. So Linda, you might want to comment on this, because I know you have a lot of opinions around salary disclosure.
Okay.
Should a job seeker disclose their pre-COVID salary or the most recent pay cut due to COVID-19 to the potential employer? Or should they do both pre and current salaries?
Yeah, I would do both. I would do both. And again, I think that's because when I'm talking to somebody that's working at a retailer within hospitality, and I ask them, did you have to take a pay cut? And you'd have to be living under a rock not to ask that kind of question if you're a recruiter. So yes, I would disclose both. More information is better. So, and what you need to do, we talk about how to negotiate compensation all the time with the candidates that we're working with, and our feedback to them is be honest, and companies are they really want you to be happy going in. So I would say 95% of the cases, they will try to do the right thing by you. So if you ask them if there's wiggle room, or if you ask them if they have an ability to go a little bit higher, if they can, they will. If they can't, they won't. So it's a little more black and white than I think some candidates might think. So any thoughts on that, Heidi? I don't know if you have any.
No, I definitely agree. I think I've actually had a client who was interested in a candidate, but the comp that he was at was a bit higher, but he was willing to maybe take a pay cut. And the client said that he really doesn't believe in that. He doesn't want to bring people in.
Wow.
Yeah. He doesn't want to bring people in at a pay cut, because he feels that kind of just starts things off on a bad foot, I guess. So yeah, I think you're right. I think for the most part, companies want to, make their employees happy and do the right thing by them.
Yeah, and the other thing that's important to remember as you go through an interview process, and when you're looking for a new role, you want to make sure that the compensation on the client side matches your expectations. So that's why it's really important to be clear about what those expectations are up front, so you don't waste your time and you're not wasting any time on the client side. And oftentimes when you're not working with us, that there might be this fuzziness, and I'm just like, why wouldn't you know that right from the beginning? And we're very, very transparent with our candidates on what the range is the client is, what they're talking about, to the best of our ability. And again, it's just all the way through the process, you'll understand what to expect, so there are no surprises at the end. That's the last place where somebody should be surprised.
Agreed. Yep.
All right, I think we're going to do one more question so we can get everybody out of here by noon Central Time. So In analytics and data science, as far as skills, what skills do you see that separate the top performers or the higher earners from the rest of the pack?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is probably the business acumen and having obviously the strong quantitative knowledge and experience, but also having that strategic mindset and kind of knowing, you know, what to do with all the data and analytics and how to see the bigger picture. I think that's probably what you're going to want to see, or what our clients want to see, as we're kind of recruiting for those more senior level roles and you know, those
Right.
higher earners, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's a common complaint that, you know, the business acumen is a common complaint that clients will have on candidates, and especially junior level candidates. And, you know, my comment to the candidates out there is you need to understand the business context that you're of the company that you're potentially going to work for or that you work in. You should also be reading, you know, this seems so simple, but if you read the Wall Street Journal every single day, you'll start to get it. It's going to take a while, but you'll start to get it. But back on the client side, I always tell my clients too, a lot of that's on them, on the manager, to make sure that they teach these young people how to think about the business in a wider context. And they should always take the time to have those kinds of discussions. That's how people learn, is, you know, and you know, for the junior level people, be sure you ask questions. No question is a dumb question. Just ask questions and learn about the business. For the more senior level people, it's, you know, it's kind of what I talked about during the webinar, in that those softer skills are really important to be able to, you know, develop those strong partnerships, customize the message, and then also keep focused on business value. What you're doing, is it of value, and how do you measure that? So all of those things are, I think, are critically important, you know, beyond, you know, how, you know, what kind of a crackerjack coder you are. So, yeah.
All right, yeah, great. Thank you guys both. That's a wonderfully thorough answer, I think. All right, so I think that is all the time we have today, but I want to thank everybody for joining us. It was, I think, a great webinar. We had a lot of information, but there's a lot more. So go ahead and go to burtchworks.com/study and download. There's some great stuff in there, some really good insights, I think. Thank you again, Linda and Heidi, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, everybody. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much.